Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on this cold day, especially when you have other obligations, students, lunch hours, Zoom opportunities for professional development. I very much prefer presenting in person, so I was very thankful for the opportunity to do so. And hopefully we will end the semester on a high note today. What I'm going to talk about with you all is connection through creativity. Like Ross mentioned, my name is Christina Bowles. I'm the coordinator of student success coaches in the Center for Academic Success and Transition. I had to think about that for just half a second. And I am also a former academic advisor to undeclared students. The reason I wanted to talk about this topic is it's something that is sort of something I'm just very passionate about, creativity. So growing up, I was always one of those kids that was very, I liked to draw, I liked coloring, I loved music, still do, just we have a very creative household. And so this is something that's always been part of my identity. My Holland code, for those of you that are familiar with career advising, is artistic, social, and enterprising, artistic scoring the highest. So I've often wondered, how can I incorporate creativity into my day-to-day work? Well, I was fortunate to meet a very good friend of mine, CADA, the Global Community for Academic Advising, and his name is John Sauter. He is in Buffalo, and he is also an artist, and so he and I really connected through that piece of our identities together, and also being academic advisors, having lots of discussions about how to incorporate creativity in what we do day to day. So this will be a little bit of a mix. Some talk about creativity and what that looks like, diving into advising a little bit, and then you also have a handout / worksheet that we'll kind of be working through throughout the presentation as well. And then if you want an extra copy that's not written in to share with your colleagues, I'm happy to share that out also. So when we're thinking about creativity, we often kind of default to the artistic part of creativity. Even I mentioned in my introduction, some of the things that I enjoy doing or ways that I express myself are typically through those kind of standard forms of creativity that we think about. But creativity is also originality, creative problem solving, maybe approaching a problem in a new way. And so we're kind of going to focus on that a little bit as well. So when we're thinking about why creativity is important, I'm going to share some examples. And I am one of those people that if you have suggestions or questions, just feel free to shout it out or raise your hand or however you feel comfortable with that. I have a rambunctious 11-year-old, and so I'm used to constant interruptions or things kind of going really quickly. But I do want to talk a little bit in general terms why creativity is important. And my first example is going to be the Fosbury flop. Did anybody in here do track and field? Okay, Kelly, I had a feeling you did. I was like, I bet Kelly has.
I went to University of Oregon, so.
Okay, so you know. Okay, so we have an expert in here. So I did not do the high jump. I was a sprinter. However, it wasn't until recently that I learned that we didn't always do the high jump this way. So if those of you that are familiar with the high jump, and the picture will kind of show you, a high jumper will run, turn, and then go back over the bar, which seems counterintuitive, but it's how, at least in my time in track and field, had always been done. So Dick Fosbury was an American high jumper who in 1968 won the gold medal at the Summer Olympics, and he revolutionized high jumping by starting a new way of jumping over the high bar. So it used to be, the problem is, of course, getting over the high bar. The traditional way to approach that, literally and figuratively, would be to run and jump forward. And so he tried turning, going over backwards to make it a little bit more effortless. And now when you think of the high jump, this is generally probably the form that you expect to see. So I wanted to share this example because it's an example of creative, critical thinking, approaching a problem in a new way, and then also being offered support. He was able to do the jump in this format because they had, the padding and mats for him to land. Whereas I think in previous years, high jumpers would often be expected to land on their feet, which again, just seems impossible to me. But now it is known as the Fosbury flop, which I think is funny because flop has a negative connotation, but flop because you're flopping anyway. So this kind of shows the influence of creativity on critical thinking and vice versa. A recent study showed that college students' critical thinking was found to be positively related to their creativity. So when students are given an opportunity to feel like they can be creative, feel like they can fail and bounce back, that's going to help increase their critical thinking. They also have higher positive expectations and confidence in the success of innovation in those supportive environments. So as advisors, how can we provide those supportive environments for our students? I think about situations where I've had to approach a problem and come up with a solution. And in situations where I kind of felt the freedom to be able to possibly fail and be okay, I felt like my creativity was enhanced in those situations. I was able to really kind of think outside the box. And so I think this is just a really great example of how we can provide that support for our students as well regarding critical thinking. So I want you to take a moment and think about in what ways are you creative? And then you can either, I was going to maybe do some partner sharing, but we can just share out since there's, we're kind of spread out a little bit and we're all hopefully friends and colleagues here. So I want you to think about this for just a moment and try to think about ways that it doesn't necessarily have to be related to art, although it could. I have another very good friend of mine from Nakata who is, his background is in art. But of course, as we get into our professional careers, sometimes it's hard to make time for those hobbies and those interests that we have. And I remember having a conversation with him one day and he was like, I just don't feel like I'm creative anymore. I'm just not really doing anything. And I was like, Jeff, you're like literally a chef. Like I still use his pimento cheese recipe on the regular. And I'm like, I think that's a form of creativity. And so that's just an example of how you can think about the ways you're creative. Maybe take a moment to think about it. And if anybody would like to share, I would love to hear from some folks in here as well. Oh yeah, please.
I teach human anatomy, and so that in general is very visual. And so students sometimes have a hard time looking at stuff in lab and then seeing all of the words in lecture. And so I've gotten pretty good at like drawing their models in lecture and then comparing it or like adding in the lecture components. And so that way they can kind of create that spatial relationship.
Yeah, that's great. So using those creative skills to help your students learn, especially those that are more visual learners and especially with the topic that you're teaching. So yeah, anatomy and physiology, anything to do with the body sciences. I love diagrams. So yeah, I love that. Someone else.
I feel like in education abroad, we have a lot of information that we need to share with students, and yet students are not as engaged in in-person events as they were prior to the COVID pandemic. And so I feel like I've been really creative in my ever evolving approach to try to get the information to students and get them to engage in the content. I guess in that pursuit, we've redone the way that we deliver our pre-departure orientation. Now we have a lot of it split up in YouTube videos that they watch before we get together, and then we do a very interactive in-person orientation. So I feel like that's been helpful to like bridge the gaps there.
Yeah. So, and if I repeat things, it's just I'm sure the mic can pick it up. So, Amy, thank you for sharing. I think that's a great example of taking an issue that we're all kind of facing, like getting people to come to or getting students to come to events, especially post-pandemic, and trying to find a creative solution to that and trying some new things. So maybe doing some videos like you mentioned, and then having just some different types of engagement with our students. Absolutely. Okay, anyone else? Oh, yeah, thank you.
So I have two young children, and I find that parenting requires a lot of creativity, especially when it comes to motivating them. And I find that a lot of times I can kind of use similar approaches with my advisees, to get them, not to convince, but to motivate them to approach, whatever it is that they need to with a bit more like enthusiasm and be goal oriented.
I love that. And I can't even tell you how many times I think about how parenting my 11-year-old is not that different than success coaching sometimes. So I think, yeah, using our real life examples and trying to translate that to another population. And I think about like, my child is motivated by food. Pizza can motivate students. I mean, it's a pretty powerful thing. So I love that example. Thank you. Okay, well, those are really great. I'm not surprised. Advisors are always a great crowd to present to. So if you're thinking about ways to sort of increase your creativity or find other ways to be creative throughout the day, if you're one of those people like myself that really kind of crave those opportunities, there are some low pressure creative exercises that you can engage in. I know journaling is very popular. I tend to journal about things that I'm grateful for. When I do journal, I'm not as quite as consistent as I probably should be, but just sort of the stream of consciousness, mind dumps, things like that can help clear our brain and help us kind of spark creativity. Mindless drawing or doodling is also a way to clear space to come up with some more creative ideas. Many of you are familiar with Susan Martindale, who was an advisor in the Academic Advising and Transfer Center, and she would often draw during staff meetings, but she was also the person who I feel like had the most creative solutions to some of the issues that we were facing. And her office also reflected her creativity, which we'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Using things like 6-word stories. And so the example I'm going to use is very relevant for the time of year. But if you've ever heard of explaining a movie plot badly, and Charlie, I will be so disappointed if you don't get this. Precocious child sets traps to capture criminals. Home Alone, yeah, it's a Christmas movie, so gotta be on brand with the time of year. But using 6-word stories, and this could be describing the weather outside. For those English folks in here, think William Carlos Williams, image poems, things like that, which leads me into poetry, writing a poem. Haiku is really kind of simple and it has a structure. So if you're someone who needs a little bit of structure, mind mapping, so kind of going back to the anatomy example, for those of you that are more visual learners or like to view things visually, I recommend mind mapping a lot, especially to my science students. I use mind mapping when I'm setting my goals every year. And so for 2026, when I start to work on my goals, I'll have my values in the middle in a big bubble, and then I surround it with activities, and then I connect those to people and other more smaller goals to help me reach those, and then connecting back to my values. It looks like a mess, but it makes sense to me. And then brainstorming is inherently a creative activity. Have any of you ever been in a brainstorming session where you feel like you have to come up with the perfect solution right away? You don't feel free to just sort of throw spaghetti on the wall, so to speak. Brainstorming works most effectively when it is a creative practice. My husband, who also works at the university, he's in web strategy and development. He has ideation as one of his strengths. I think it might be his top strength for those of you that are familiar with Clifton Strengths Finder. And when I found that out, I realized I had a great brainstorming partner. And so if I need help with an issue, or if I'm trying to work on a project, Philip is the first person I go to because I can brainstorm with him very easily, because we're just throwing stuff out there. And, a lot of them aren't going to be winners, but those few that come out that are gems are pretty wonderful. So I do want to take just maybe 2 to 3 minutes. I'll go ahead and set a timer. On your worksheet, you have a box that has each of the activities on the worksheet. So I just want to spend a couple of minutes doing one of these. Any of them that you want, whichever one you feel comfortable with. If you feel like you need to be productive, maybe do brainstorming about something that you're working on in your office. It could also be personal. It's completely up to you, but I'm gonna go ahead and set a timer and then give you all some time to work on this. Best coach, I have to be used to really long, awkward silences because these are the kinds of things I have my students do. I mean, not these specifically, but they have to write things while I sit there quietly and try not to look right at them. Avoid eye contact. So, just some questions. How did this feel? Is this something you feel like you could engage in regularly? So would anybody like to share what you did and how that felt and just kind of how you're feeling? Again, that was only a couple of minutes, but yeah, Kimmy. Sure.
So I did poetry and I love haikus and I tried to start with one and it ended up just being free form. And I think that was actually perfect because what I wrote was, I wish I had time to do it all the way I'd like, but I will still smile. And it's just something of recognizing like, I'm trying to make sure that like I do things well, but they don't have to be perfect. And it's okay if my haiku had 8 syllables instead of 7, because it was still just fine. Like that was just a really fun full circle moment that came up that like I was like, so it's fun to see that just this activity wasn't even just the activity. It was like made that click in my mind of like, what a perfect little example. And it made me feel more comfortable with like, you know, the small things that don't go just right. So I just liked that was, and yeah, I think it just worked out perfectly. And I love little reflective moments and I try to be mindful and I know how much mindfulness can help in every way, but I don't think I do mindfulness very well because I get so sidetracked so quick that I'm like, well, this other thought came and who cares? Doing something intentional and very physical of like, I have to finish this tangible thing made me more mindful. So I love this. Thanks, Christina.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Kimmy, especially because I know how vulnerable that can be when we're being creative. But a few things that you said that I really appreciate, well, everything, because I just really appreciated the poem too. It's very sweet and so true. It's, when we're talking about creativity, it's okay to not be perfect. Just doing anything is going to kind of have those benefits. Taking time, like you're all a captive audience, you're stuck here. I mean, what are you going to do for the next 2 minutes? So just kind of taking that time to really dive in and do something to be kind of mindful too. Yeah, and I'm the same way. Like I want to build this more into my daily routine, like just those few moments of mindfulness. But it is a challenge because then we're thinking of something else, or someone's at the door, or whatever the case might be. So I'm glad that this was beneficial for you. Yeah. Does someone else want to share? Charlie.
You want to hear my haiku?
Yes.
Creativity, it can help us all advise, indubitably.
Indubitably. I love that. Good job.
Thank you.
I feel like we should have like, I don't know, like a little poetry board or something, like poems about advising. That's a great word that is not used nearly often enough. Anyone else?
I am not that level of creativity. I also did not remember the structure of a haiku. But I created some brainstorming ideas of how to help students because I have huge classes, like 150 students. And so like flipped classroom, pre and post test, like things that are meant to like have, proven to help students. And so I was trying to think of like what all I could incorporate, maybe little by little.
Yeah. And then do you have, or what is like one of those ideas that you feel like you could maybe gain some traction on in the next 2 days? Is there anything that you can do like soon?
Yes, so we are actually in the middle of writing an experiential learning grant for creating more 3D models. And it's actually a collaboration between dietetics, kinesiology, hopefully art, if I can get some of their students in.
Like,
But that would also allow research opportunities, and so we're literally in the middle of that.
oh, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing, and that's wonderful. Brainstorming is so valuable, and I think the next most important piece is thinking, okay, out of these ideas, what can I start to work on as soon as possible? And it sounds like this was incredibly relevant and timely too. Oh, great. Well, thank you all so much. I think Kimmy really hit the nail on the head for why this exercise can be important. And I think also it's just a great reminder that we're all creative and we're all creative in very different ways. And the product that we make is not necessarily the most important part. The important part is how it helps our productivity, how it makes us feel, just kind of getting those creative thoughts flowing. So I'm finally going to get to the advising piece because this is an advising forum. So I do want to talk a little bit about creativity connected specifically to advising. And the subtitle is Practical Implications of a Seemingly Impractical Skill Set, because I've not really ever, until more recently in my life, I mean, creativity had always been like a hobby or maybe like a form of expression, but I've really grown to understand like how I can utilize that in my student support practice. So I'm going to kind of couch it in appreciative advising. For those of you that are not familiar with appreciative advising, I would definitely encourage you to check out the resources that I have on the handout at the end of the slides. This is a model that was created by Dr. Jenny Bloom, and it's sort of couched in positive psychology, using tools like motivational interviewing to really provide a student-centered advising approach. I'm going to kind of go over it a little bit more broadly, and then we're going to dive into couple of the phases more specifically. So this model has 6 phases. Disarm is the first phase. The goal of disarming is to help the student feel like not have anxiety, to feel comfortable in our space, to be able to share with us. In the discover phase is where advisors use active listening and open-ended questions to find out more about the student. So their strengths, their interests, and this is really building that groundwork or that foundation for understanding our students better and then supporting them in the best way that we can. In the dream phase, this is where, this is probably the most creative piece of appreciative advising. And this is where we're helping students really think about what their future could look like. And so these are the conversations that as a former advisor to undeclared students, I really loved having. And I still sometimes have similar conversations with students when I'm coaching. I was coaching a student this week who is undeclared, kind of looking at some different options for majors. She's very interested in studying Spanish. And so we talked about some different like opportunities and kind of what her goals are and ultimately what she would do with that as an area of study. And so again, this is the part where we're really helping students to kind of just really dream big. In the design phase, advisors help students create a plan to achieve those dreams. So this is where those short-term goals come in, access to resources and support from an advisor. In the deliver phase is where students are actually acting out their plan. And we are, as advisors, are there for support and motivation. And so trying to help them stay motivated and connected to their goals. And then don't settle. This is where advisors are encouraging students to strive for continuous improvement, to stay motivated, to continue to have those big dreams and know that they have the ability to do so. So very much a strengths-based kind of mindset as well. So I do want to dive into a few of the phases more specifically. So in disarm, you only have one chance to make a good first impression. So how are you disarming your students when they come into your office? There are 4 phases or 4, features in the disarm phase. The first feature is the warm welcome. So when a student comes into your office, are you smiling? Are you shaking their hand? Do they have someone that greets them when they come in to see you? How are you creating that warm space and that welcome for the student? Is your office a safe and comfortable environment? And this could be physically safe, but I think with our offices, we're probably thinking more like psychologically safe or emotionally safe. What kind of a space are we inviting our students into? And is it comfortable? What's the temperature like? Is it tidy? Is there, a lot of clutter, or maybe it's completely blank? That can also be maybe not quite as comfortable. And so thinking about how we're creating our office space. Appropriate self-disclosure. We all have those students that self-disclose a lot. There might also be some advisors that sometimes over-disclose. So appropriate self-disclosure to create that warm and welcoming environment and encouraging students to also share with us. And then appropriate nonverbal behavior. And so appropriate eye contact, keeping an open stance, things like that. But those are the main features of the disarm phase. So there's probably an obvious answer, but everybody's different. Which office is going to be more welcoming? The office on the left or the office on the right? I'm hopefully assuming correctly that it would be the office on the right that might be more welcoming. Although I do also understand it's a busy time of year, and so sometimes our offices get cluttered. But imagine a student walking into the office on the left. They're going to be distracted. They're also going to wonder why that person is using a ridiculously old computer. So it's probably an old photo. I don't know. But they're going to be distracted by the clutter. They might also even kind of wonder if their advisor knows what they're doing. Like they're going to probably be a little bit anxious. So there's a lot of feelings that are probably going to come from that environment. The office on the right has warm lighting. There's a plant, some wallpaper. Just feels a lot more warm and inviting than the office on the left. So kind of thinking about disarming our students, how does your office reflect who you are? So this is a photo of some of the items that I have in my office that generate conversation and are also parts of my personality. So the one that probably creates the most conversation is my Fellowship of the Ring print. I'm a huge Lord of the Rings nerd, and so my students, when they see that, if they're also into Lord of the Rings, that creates a really great icebreaker for us. I also have items on my wall that were gifted to me by friends and colleagues, very dear friends and colleagues. And so again, just trying to reflect who I am as a person and what's important to me and how I can create a welcoming and warm environment for my students. So how does your office reflect who you are? If someone would like to share, is there something or some things in your office that maybe help you show your students who you are, or maybe generate conversation with your students? Yeah, Kenny.
I have a poster that says everything is figure outable, and it's my favorite. Like, yeah, we're gonna figure it out, but also be like a little silly of is figure outable even a word, but like it's just
I like that. I'm adding figure outable and indubitably to my list of words for the day. I love that. And yeah, and it's just a way to like remind students like this is going to be okay.
we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Does someone else want to share something in your office? Yeah, Katie.
This sometimes gets some fun stories. So I have a picture of me meeting Joey Fatone. And because of this younger generation, I have been asked a couple times if that was my husband. And I'm like, no. And then we have a whole fun, like, do you know who NSYNC is? And like, so that was kind of a fun one that I have in my office.
I love that. And I love that. I mean, that would be like, I don't know, like pretty high praise. Like,
Yeah,
no, that's not my husband, but
Sorry.
I love that. That's
No,
so
they most of the time do not know who NSYNC is, unfortunately.
yeah, so it breaks my heart just a little bit, but yeah, I love that because again, it's a great conversation starter. It's part of who you are. It's something that I've now since learned about you, and so I just think that those kinds of things are very, very safe and warm and welcoming, and just really helps the students kind of know who we are as a person and be able to make those connections with us. So I want to take just maybe a minute. Think of 5 things you can do. Just picture your office and think of 5 things that you can do to make your office more disarming. Something that I failed to mention in one of the earlier slides was there's an exercise that Dr. Bloom has advisors do. She encourages them to sit in the chair where their student sits. How many of you have ever sat where your student sits? Okay, good. So you all are familiar. I remember the first time I did that in my office in the Academic Advising and Transfer Center. I sat down and I noticed that all I saw was a blank cinder block wall because, you know, you can't really put nails into cinder blocks. I didn't have anything up on that wall. I had 2 windows. I also noticed that the time of the day in the afternoon, the sun was right in my eyes. And I thought, oh my gosh, my students have been way too nice to tell me that they've been like, you know, blinded by the sun every time they meet with me in the afternoon. And so after sitting in that spot, I made some adjustments to make that space more comfortable for my students. So I'm glad to hear that you all have participated in that activity and just kind of thinking about, okay, what does my student see when they're sitting in my office? So yeah, just take maybe about a minute to think of 5 things you can do to make your office more disarming. And it could even be something like, I don't know, dusting. How often do you dust your office? I do not dust my office nearly as much as I probably should. So things like that could be very, very specific. Does anyone want to share one of the things that you plan to do to kind of make your office more comfortable, more inviting, or just something that you know you would like to do to make it a safe space for your students? Yeah, Charlie.
I can give you all 5 if you want.
Sure, go for it.
I think more curiosities and talking pieces is a great idea. That's number 1 for me. Better seating, so that there's a more established face-to-face kind of conversation. I think beverages and snack offers are really great. I also think blankets when it's cold, like just having a basket full of blankets would be nice. Or like fidget devices, fidget spinners and stuff like that. It's a nice idea. And then lastly, if this was possible, like a resident puppy.
And then we would all be in your office all the time. I love that. Those are all such great examples too. Like just thinking about the student, like the fidgets, a blanket, anything to make it more comfortable, the conversation pieces, especially like if a student comes in and they see something in there, and it's like when that connection happens, like, oh, I know that thing, and I also really like it. That's just like an immediate connection. Did I see some other hands? Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, so actually rearranged my office because I had my one student last year mentioned that they didn't like meeting in my office because the desk faced there because I like feng shui. So the command position, but because there was now a barrier, they didn't like meeting in there. They actually liked meeting in other areas. And I was like, oh. So then all I did was switch it around, and then students spent more time because then they could actually physically see like most of me. And I also have a couch in my office, and I have emotional support dumplings for my students to hold and play with. They have different faces. They're on Amazon.
I love that. And I love that that you're willing to like try something new and do something different than maybe what you would typically feel comfortable with, or maybe what you're not typically used to, because you accepted feedback from your students to be able to like make it a more open space. Yeah. And I love that I'm not the only one that I have a basket of like I have palm pals, and I have some like stress balls on my table that I meet with students at. And I'm glad that I'm not the only one, because I thought, oh, I don't know, this is just something I'm going to do, and my students love it. So if you take nothing else away from this presentation, maybe go get some stress balls or little fidgets for your students. Does anyone else want to share? Yeah, Kimmy.
We got new furniture for our offices, and it's amazing. I love it. I'm so grateful. I picked them out, so this is on me. The front is metal, and it's a full privacy panel. When that happens with wood, you don't hear anything. With metal that has nothing on it, and every student scoots up, we start every meeting with thunder. Just reverberating metal thunder. And every time they're like, I'm so sorry, and it like makes them nervous. And I'm like, this is just ruining the vibe from the start. So I need to find something to put tension on that so that it doesn't reverberate, and they can kick it all they want. But it just immediately puts them like they feel awkward because they made this big loud noise, and I need to fix it.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like maybe a brainstorming session is in order. Like thinking about, okay, like maybe what's on the feet of the chair, maybe something, or just thinking about some ways to address. I love that though, that you're like, again, the student feedback. So I don't want to, so Blanca, your office is one that I feel like so Blanca is one of my coworkers, and she has, her office is one of those places that like you know who she is when you walk in there. And I think that sort of like communication is really valuable. And so I couldn't remember when you popped in, but I wanted to, because I thought of your office. I was thinking of like things that kind of tell who you are. So like pictures of family and things like that. So okay. Well, hopefully that sounds like that was a very productive exercise, and we've got some really great ideas. I have some great ideas from those of you that shared also, so cataloging those for later. In his book, Walden, Henry David Thoreau wrote, I learned this at least by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with the success unexpected in common hours. Again, the dream phase is where we're encouraging students to really think about what their future could look like and actively pursue that future. So some creative ways to do this as academic advisors is to help our students visualize their future. So this could look like asking them to think about their life 5 to 10 years from now, maybe creating a resume that's 5 years in the future so they can start thinking about what they want to add to their college experience. You could also have a student take some of their strengths and interests and just other characteristics and do like a mind map and connecting those things to majors and careers that might be a good fit for their strengths and interests. You could also do a vision board with your student or encourage them to make a vision board. I know that's very popular with our students right now. I advise a student organization for first generation college students. And last spring, we did a vision board activity. And that was it was really fun and it was very impactful. I made a vision board that's in my office that is in a place where I can see it regularly so I can be reminded of kind of what motivates me. As an advisor, it's important to be a thought partner and not the decision maker in this process because we're brainstorming with our students about ideas for their future and helping them really dream big. Again, encouraging curiosity and not necessarily requiring perfection. So again, that kind of came up as another theme, but this doesn't have to be perfect. So just helping our students think about ways to really be creative and curious in what their future might look like. Really pay attention to those moments when your students. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
For those of us over 35, what's a vision board?
I'm glad you asked. Thank you. So a vision board
And what
is, I know for our activity, you can do it in various different ways. So for our group, what we did is we had like the 10 by 10 scrapbook pages. And so we used that as like a base. And then I just got a bunch of old magazines from the libraries. A lot of them are like cigar and horses, which I don't know. Maybe it's because we're in the Ozarks, but the magazine stack I had was very unusual, but we made it work. And so what we did was we cut out like words or phrases or pictures that sort of align with like what our goals were for this semester, maybe things that are important to us. So like on mine, I have mother, I have a picture of like a Kandinsky painting, and then there was like a couple of other things on there, something about just kind of like not being afraid to kind of be out there. And so it's just a way to sort of summarize kind of who you are and what your goals
So it's
are.
like a vibes-based inspirational collage, I guess.
Yeah. To use art terms, yes. Like mine is more of like a collage. You could do it digitally as well. I just love the glue sticks and the scissors and the kind of the more tactile versions of it. But yeah, thank you for asking that. Listen for when your students kind of light up. So whenever I was advising undeclared students, I had a student that was very interested in music. He also made it very clear that he didn't want to be a music major. And so I was like, okay, well, what do we do with this? And so I just started asking him a bunch of questions. And one of the questions I asked was, what is it that you like about music? And he said, well, I really like recording music. And then I said, well, you can like study that here, and just the look on his face and just how his demeanor changed. And so again, just kind of helping our students visualize what their future might look like and looking for those moments when they light up. Also normalizing uncertainty, again, for those of us that have worked or do work with undeclared students, or even students who are declared but maybe not sure what their specific career path is, normalizing that process, and again, reminding students that it doesn't have to be perfect, that being curious can be really valuable. The design phase is the last phase that I'm going to talk about for the session today. Setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. So again, the design phase is where the advisor is helping the student design a plan and a roadmap to achieve their dreams and to achieve their long-term goals, professional, personal, and academic. So some examples that I have for design, you might want to use a SMART Goals worksheet with your students. There's lots of available SMART Goals worksheets through like Canva, probably some other online resources. We have some that we use in CAST. And of course, just a reminder, SMART goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. And so that kind of can give students a visual representation of what their goals might be to help them achieve their long-term goals. Again, a vision board or a vision collage, something that reminds students why they're motivated to achieve these goals, and another creative way to work and partner with our students. Some other examples are thinking about like taking their dream and then breaking it down. Like, okay, based on this long-term goal, what do you need to do a year out from this? What about a semester? What about today? What can you do today? That kind of leads me to the question that I like to ask my students is what can you do, usually the next 24 to 48 hours, but sometimes within the next week, to move one step closer to at least one of your goals. So the design phase is really an opportunity for us to, again, kind of think outside the box and help our students maybe think of different ways to create their plan. And these are just some examples that I like to use with my students or encourage them to do as well. So as a coach, we always like takeaways, and we also like brainstorming, and we like students to have goals for the next 24 to 48 hours. And so what I'd like you all to do is we're going to do our last exercise, brainstorm at least 8 ways that you can incorporate creativity into your advising or student support or teaching practice. Don't rule anything out. Like we already talked about, brainstorming is a very creative activity. And so don't be afraid to just throw it all out there. And then when you're done, I want you to think about maybe 1 or 2 of those options that you can commit to doing in the next 24 to 48 hours. I also know it's a very busy time of year. So if there's only one thing that you can do, that's okay. But yeah, we're going to take 2 full minutes, because this is a coaching exercise, and brainstorm at least 8 ways. If you come up with more, great, but try to come up with at least 8. End of the 2 minutes. Just out of curiosity, how did everybody come up with 8? Okay, that's not uncommon. This exercise we do a lot with our students, and those first few ideas, they tend to come out pretty easily. And in the last few, it's like, I know mine get really weird. Like, it's like, okay, what's something very specific that I can do or that I can add to this list? But the idea of it is, again, to kind of keep that creativity going, to kind of think about, okay, I think I thought of the big things. What are some other smaller things that I can do? Or what are some things that I have to really like dig into the deep recesses of my brain to come up with? So would folks like to share one of the options, one or two of the options that you would like to try to do in the next day or two out of the ones that you came up with? Oh, yeah, Amy, and then we'll go.
This is not something that I just came up with, but it's something that I came up with yesterday, so it went on my list.
It's like I write things on my to-do list to cross them off. It's okay.
Yeah,
Do
want
that.
that dopamine. So we have our pre-departure orientation tomorrow for our students who will be studying abroad next semester and just thinking about how to engage them. We are now having a very collaborative and engaging piece of our orientation, whereas like it used to just kind of be like top-down delivery. Tomorrow, we're doing a full-blown Jeopardy game. So we gotta get these folks talking to each other. So yeah, that's something new that we're trying that we hope helps achieve that goal.
I love that. So it's creative in the sense that it's a game. It's also creative in that it's different than what you all have done in the past. You're gonna try it out, see how it goes.
Mhm.
The first time I played Jeopardy in my GEP 101 class, it sort of crashed and burned, but that was my fault. And so I tried it again, and the next time we did it, it was great.
Okay.
And so it was just that I was like, you know what? This may not work, but if it does, it's gonna be awesome. And it was awesome. So that's exciting. Thank you for sharing. Gates.
We have as you know, on the website a page, resources for underprivileged students. And I share that link a lot, but when I look at the traffic, people don't click it a lot and they don't spend a lot of time on it. And so probably not in the next, what I will do in the next 24 hours is maybe brainstorm more on how to realize this, but maybe either adding more creative based resources, because maybe the steps that are on the website, they look and they're like, yeah, I'll come back to it later. Maybe they're a little time consuming. I know it's like interviewing people, and so maybe they feel like it's more something more fun, or translating things into like something tangible I could give them. Like instead of a link, they have to follow up, like here's something to try, and then it's in their hand, and it seems more like an activity and maybe less like homework. So that's my idea.
I love that. And I love that your next step is to brainstorm even more, because then you can just take some time to like think about, okay, what's the problem? The issue is that the students are either not going to the site or they're not spending a lot of time there. So what are some creative ways to solve that? You already said like 5 things, like a handout, maybe some more like smaller, easier to absorb material on the website, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. Kirsten, did you have your hand up also?
Oh, I didn't, but
Oh,
I'll share what. No, sorry, I was kind of resting it. No, so our team met with was it Phil Bridges? Is that it?
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, with Phil yesterday, and he was talking to us about helping like international students learn like Missouri State English. And as someone who has recently started at Missouri State, there are a ton of acronyms. I work with a lot of OTC students, and so I'm thinking about maybe like making like a glossary of terms for them, like to give to them so they can kind of understand, like when someone's like, oh yeah, CNAS, like they'll know what that is. You know what I mean? So yeah.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. And that's so like transferable to other populations, like first generation students who may not understand like all the acronyms and terminology and things. And like you mentioned, transfer students. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's
if they're not from Missouri State, they're like, what are you saying? Doesn't
Yeah.
gibberish.
Does anyone else want to share something that you're committed to doing? Sharing it out really increases motivation.
I was gonna say, I try to do check-ins with my advisees a couple times this semester. But I was gonna just like send them an encouragement email, like, hey, just, regardless of how it went, it's done. So then, if you want to talk more about it, I'm available. Great. And so then this way I can try to figure out how to make it fun to actually look at versus just your summaries.
I love that. I love that. I sent out some encouraging emails to my coaching students today, and I may or may not have included some GIFs or GIFs, whatever camp you are. We won't have that discussion today, but funny images. We'll put it that way. Awesome. Well, I do want to leave just a couple minutes for questions. These are my references that I utilized for this presentation. Again, appreciative advising. If you want to learn more about that, there's lots of resources out there. There also may or may not be a video of me doing a Zoom session on appreciative advising for a former academic advising forum. But yeah, there's lots of resources out there. So thank you all. Again, thank you for bearing the cold to be here in person today. And thank you for letting me me talk about a subject that I'm very passionate and excited about, and I love sharing with people. So hopefully you all feel those creative juices flowing. Maybe you found some ideas and ways to incorporate this into your practice. Hopefully picked up some gems from other folks here as well. And thank you to Ross and the Advisement Center for letting me share today and inviting me to, well, I suggested this topic, but letting me present on this topic. So yeah, does anybody have any questions? Thank you. Yeah, Charlie.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Oh, it's okay. I put you on the spot all the time.
I was wondering if you could help, both from your experience to address how we might help students envision the future when they have apparent anxiety or cynicism about the future. And I'm thinking, I would be stumped if I was talking to a student and they met my conversation with something like that. And I want to be prepared for something like that.
Yeah. One of the things that I think that's a really great question. And I think one of the best approaches to that sort of scenario is to really do a strengths-based approach or like a growth mindset. So really helping the student think about maybe more like inwardly, like what their strengths are and what their interests are. Because if the concern is more like larger scale, like what the world is going to be like in 5 years, maybe have them do more kind of like self-reflective, asking them questions more about themselves. I think what I have found is when I'm having conversations with students that are, they're not sure why they're in college or their parents wanted them to be here, or like the example I shared about the student who like really loved music but didn't really see that as a career option. I just ask a lot of questions. I just try to dig in as deep as I can to figure out what motivates the student, what excites them, like what is something that they could talk about for an hour and like not feel weird about it. Oh, I don't know, being creative. So asking them questions like that to help them really think about the things that make them very excited. And then just encouragement, like especially when that negative kind of self-talk comes out, or if they're like that cynicism, just offering encouragement, just counterbalancing that with, but what if, or you offer this to the university community, you offer this to the world whenever you graduate. I don't know, does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot. I'm focusing on when they're having anxiety about big problems in the future that they really can't control, then asking questions to bring them back into themselves and like kind of make the world feel a little smaller in that moment. I think that's great advice.
Yeah. I think mindfulness, while it's not necessarily like a coaching, it's not part of like coaching per se. I talk about mindfulness a lot with my students. Like, well, what can you do? Like, what can you control today? Like, what can you do today? Like, I know you have this really big concern 5-10 years down the road. What can you do today?
Thanks for
Yeah.
I have a student who's not even in our program, seems to be self-sabotaging their academics, because I've looked through their notes and they have had 3 separate notes by 3 separate people saying, stop taking classes outside of your major. So this student comes and talks to me a lot. Like you said, there's a lot of self-disclosure there. And so I want to be supportive, but it's like, I'm starting to have to be very firm and like, no, you are not retaking this class. You need to listen to your advisor. So how do I handle that?
I honestly, with a student like that, I would probably ask questions like, especially if they're taking classes outside their major, asking questions like, so I noticed you took these classes. Like, what was sort of your motivation for enrolling in these classes? I would just ask a lot of questions to figure out about their major, about why they're sort of like taking all these other classes. It sounds to me like the student is still not really sure maybe what they want to do. And so they're like exploring other avenues, but not really thinking about the repercussions of that either. And so also having to make that very clear in a kind way, but explaining to them, do you want to graduate in 4 years? Because
No, this is like a 7-year thing so far, and they've told me 2 very different fields that they're interested in. And I said, you have to choose one. You cannot choose both. Like one. What? Not the field that they're talking about, at least not at the same time.
I had classmates who double majored in music and computer science.
No, like the major is not the concern. It's like what they're wanting to do. And so the major that they have really doesn't seem to be supportive of either. And so their advisors have mentioned like you're going to run out of the ability to have funding. Like that's how extreme the situation is. And so it's like, I appreciate that you like my class and you want to retake it, but you've kind of sabotaged yourself to be able to retake it. And that's not a healthy behavior.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, that you might need to call in for reinforcements.
Yeah.
You know, I think too, like that could be an opportunity to talk about the like our career center on campus,
Or
even
the
send them to
counseling
us. Yeah, the counseling center or the active advice and transfer service. We do have the individualized feature. And sometimes when interest can, you know, be polar opposite, there are opportunities to maybe try to tie those together depending on what the student's long-term goals are.
Yeah.
I know that's, you know, that's a very student specific situation that you're experiencing, but yeah, I would say rely on kind of that community of advisors to help because that can be challenging. It's, I know Christine's probably willing to stay a couple minutes to finish up questions, but I just need to be aware of the time since it's a little bit after 1. But thank you all for being here. Thank you, Christina. Thank you for participating in this forum. And hopefully we'll see a lot of you in the spring for the advisor forum series. Have a good one.